95% heaven and 5% hell. That's how Michal Uziyahu, who was a leader in the Eshkol region, which includes the border towns of the Gaza area, describes her life pre-October 7th. A disillusioned paradise. That's how Dr. Ron Lobel, who lives in Netiv HaAsara, his window is 300 meters from Gaza, also described his life on October 6th. See, Dr. Lobel, he told us, with doctors in Gaza and the help of Israel, built the Shifa Hospital. He would bring Gazans from Gaza to be treated in the Barzilai Hospital, where he is in charge of emergency medicine day after day. He celebrated birthdays with them. He knew them. A disillusioned paradise, he told us. Those are only two descriptions of what we heard of what it was like before October 7th. You see, Judaism and the Torah describes Israel in three different ways. Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel. Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. And Bnei Yisrael, the children, the people of Israel. And as I spent the last 7 days in Israel, I have three new descriptions of what I saw. A war-torn Israel, a living Israel, and Israel in Los Angeles and America, where there is a perception that is not the reality. War-torn Israel. As I have now done over and over since October 7th, shared the story of Amiram Cooper, 84 when he was held hostage, now 85, uncle of Sinai Temple member Rona Passman. He was just a name on October 7th, and then he became a chair in our sanctuary. But last Sunday, as I walked along with other Sinai Temple members in Kibbutz Nir Oz, where he founded the kibbutz with his hand in 1951, he became so much more. Last Sunday, we met Mor, a 41-year-old mother of three. She was born on that kibbutz which Amiram created. And she described, as we stood in her destroyed house that looked like a horror film, she described as the terrorists infiltrated when they were in this safe room, I quote, violence in their voice. And when she went into detail of the story that I won't share now, I looked around her family room. I saw a soccer cleat of her son, stuffed animals charred. And as we went into the safe room where she was with her three children, her husband, and her dog for those long hours, there was a growth chart on the wall as she measured the growth of her children. And I thought to myself, I have the same thing. It could have been my children. It could have been your children. In fact, she said the terrorists came in 3 different times throughout that day. And do you know what they said the first time they came in when she was in the safe room? She heard these words in Hebrew, Chag Sameach. It was Simchat Torah. In fact, after 6 hours in the safe room, and they literally had destroyed the home and firebombed the house, the safe room was full of smoke, but they knew they couldn't go out. They couldn't open the window because they were shooting beyond. Her younger son told her, Ima, just open the door, let us die. Her husband had his hand up against the door. Bullets had injured them, but they kept going. They kept going. At about 2 or 3 p.m., she remembers all the noise stopped, and she heard chirping of the birds. And she looked at her husband and she thought, and she said out loud, did we die? And he said, no, we are alive. And she walked out and faced the new reality of her life. She told us, I didn't just lose my house. I lost everything. When we left her home, we went just a couple of meters towards the back where there were fields that were left completely empty. And I was able to touch with my own hands this fence, which is now rebuilt, where the terrorists infiltrated. And I began asking, because I only seen pictures on TV, where was it that Holocaust survivor Yafa Adar was driven away in the golf cart? And where was it that the Bibas twins with their mother Shiri was taken into Gaza? And she said, right here where you're standing. And as we went from house to house, there were pictures on the door. And it read either Chatuf, meaning hostage. It read Nirtzach, meaning murdered. Or it read Mishochrer. Only 2 were freed. And our last stop of that afternoon, Amiram Cooper's home. He wasn't just a name. He wasn't just a seat in the sanctuary. And he wasn't just a seat at our Seder table. But he was a person. He was a human being that created the life that was on that kibbutz. And when we ended our tour to continue on our journey, this young woman, Moore, sat on the bench smoking a cigarette. And I said, Moore, would you come back home? And she looked at me with a blank stare. And she said, Rabbi, it's still October 7th. I can't even begin to answer that question. For so much of Israel and the Jewish world, it's still October 7th. And we're trying to wake up from this nightmare. And yet, Od Lo, and yet there is a living Israel. By living Israel, I don't mean what I witnessed, which was cafes open till way past midnight in Tel Aviv on Dizengoff, and Machane Yehuda, the Shuk, the market in Jerusalem, bustling with American teens and other locals on Thursday night before Shabbat, and people early in the morning playing volleyball on the beach in Tel Aviv. But what I mean as a living Israel is young people and old people and people of all walks of life spending their days and nights differently now to ensure that this small patch of land endures forever. A living Israel. I spent last Shabbat with my aunt and uncle and my cousins in Elkanah. My cousin Elad was just drafted into the paratroopers, and I walked into their house on Friday afternoon, and there were these big balloons. It didn't say Yom Huledet Sameach. It said Giyus Kal. It means have an easy draft. I watched as he exchanged a uniform for civilian clothes. I watched as he spent all Shabbat sleeping on the couch of exhaustion of his first week in the Tzahal in the army. And I watched on Sunday morning when I became a tourist, but he went back to become a soldier. He exchanged his talit back for a uniform. On Sunday morning, his mother, my first cousin, kissed him goodbye once again, praying that she would see him this Shabbat. A living Israel. Our group from the Jewish National Fund USA, we went to the border town of Tzochar, which is not well known. And there, for a few hours, we lived out Ben Gurion's dream. We literally made the desert bloom. It was literally a patch of dirt, and for hours, members of Sinai Temple took sod and planted it, something I've never done here. And at the end, I asked the head of the community, why is this important to you? And he said, because you gave my children a place to play. As we planted saplings in the kindergarten yard, the gan, there was young girl, and she went up to another Sinai Temple member in Hebrew and asked him a question, and the teacher translated the question, Efshar lishtol od? Can we plant some more, please? A living Israel. Where that same child has 15 seconds to run to their ma'amad, their safe room in their kindergarten. Where they taught us the nursery rhyme that they sing as they do. They say, Halev, boom, boom, boom. Our hearts go boom, boom, boom as we run from the sirens. All she wanted to do was plant a tree and play in a sandbox like my kids do. And even in the worst of situations, a living Israel. On our last evening, we met Sheli Shem Tov, the mother of Omer Shem Tov, held hostage in Gaza, 21 years old. He, like so many hundreds of others, went to the Nova Festival for a party. She told us on October 6th, it was her birthday. She looked up at the blue sky. She said, Todah La'el, thank God I have everything in my life. And hours later, as they began to understand what was happening, they called their son Omer on his cell phone and began to be worried. And they said, give us your location. He sent them the Google location, and they watched on their phone as he was kidnapped. And the Google location began to go into Gaza. After 54 days of being hostage, the young man who Omer was held hostage with was released, and Shelley began to find out more about her son. She told us the day when the terrorists gave them grape juice for some reason. And they understood by calculating the day that was a Friday, was Shabbat. And Omer, the youngest of three, loves to say Kiddush at his home. And so he took the grape juice, and the two boys found literally a scrap of paper on the ground and put it on their head as a kippah. He said the Kiddush, and he told this young man who was released, it was the first time that he felt close to home. After his friend Itai was released, the IDF went to find where they were, and they found a diary that Omer was writing over those days. Shelley shared with us 3 things that were in that diary. The first page was a page of faith. On it, it said, 1 more day. 1 more day. She turned the page. On the second day, it said, food, 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 food. She says every day she puts a piece of food in her mouth, she can only imagine the hunger that he goes through. And the last page, it said, my dear mom, I love you. She has not heard from him since. And yet every single day, she says she goes to bed disheveled, but wakes up in the morning, goes into his room. And in that bedroom where he left is a complete mess. A complete mess. And somebody asked her, well, how do you get on with your day? And she says she has an image in her mind that Omer walks into the house. She gives him a hug. And she says, Omer, it's time to clean your room. It's time to clean your room. Because Shelley Shem Tov has a dream of a living Israel too. A day that her son will come back, a day that all of them will come back. That the simple things will truly matter. And the third Israel that I don't want to spend as much time on is what's happening right here in America. I arrived home inspired, emotional, and what did I hear? Helicopters. Helicopters overhead, a WhatsApp group. There's another encampment at UCLA. I saw pictures of Harvard commencement of students walking out, of Columbia diplomas being ripped up on the stage. And I thought to myself, if only my cousin Elad would come and speak to those students about his experience in this last 2 weeks. If only Omer Shem Tov could walk out of captivity and come to those encampments and tell them about his last 230 days. If only Amiram Cooper could come home and tell those students what it was like before October 7th as he built his paradise. If only. And if only those students in those encampments around this country would take just one day and walk around Kibbutz Nir Oz and walk into the home of Shelley Shem Tov. If only they would see a picture of an Israel that wants to live. But you know what the picture of living Israel really is? It's the only picture that I could not post online. And you'll understand in a minute. Because of its sensitive nature, one morning we began by cooking chicken and rice and cutting cabbage. Again, not my specialty. And it took hours to pack up these meals. And we took them to the soldiers. This base was about a mile from Ramallah. You could see it from where we were standing. It was a co-ed counterterrorism unit. And these kids, and I mean kids, was the first unit, and by unit, not just individuals, but unit to show up at the Nova Festival. There were 4 19-year-old girls. They had M16s draped over them. They pistols in their belt. And we asked to take a picture but not post. And this picture that I will show you after Shabbat was unbelievable. Because it wasn't about the uniforms and it wasn't about the weapons. But they went like this. And they wanted to show us their beautiful pink and red and blue manicures. They were kids in a living Israel. We were feeding their bodies, but we were feeding their souls. And when their strong, very strong commander came out to tell us who they were and what they were doing, he said, "You see these girls? They saved our country. They were the ones that were in charge to create a defensive line on that day to prevent the Nokba terrorists from going any further." That's the living Israel that we witnessed and saw. My friends, there are three Israels, a Medinat, an Eretz, and B'nai, a land, a state, and the people, but there are three Israels today, a war-torn land, a living land, and this Israel that we are all experiencing here, thousands of miles away. For 7 months, we have spoken about it day after day and sent emails and brought speakers. But I can tell you, and for those of you who have been there since, there is no substitute for walking that land. Because it is an Am. It's an Am Yisrael. It's a nation of Israel. And it is a nation that is crying when we go there. Michal Uziyahu, who I said 95% heaven and 5% hell, she told us as she served once as a shlicha, as an emissary for Israel in Denver, Colorado. She said when she came to this country and realized the support that we have for Israel, she said, what I realized was Israel has 15 million citizens, but only 7 million live there. It's Memorial Day weekend, and many of our summer travel is already planned. Some of us will go to national parks, visit families around the country, we'll swim in oceans and lakes, we'll go to different countries, we'll taste different foods, and we'll speak different languages. But there is only one country that needs us more than ever, and it's our home of the land of Israel. And so I'm asking you, I won't beg, but I'll ask, go to Israel. Four days of either replacing a vacation or adding to a vacation. Replace it with another trip, add it to it, take a few days off of work. We went with JNF USA. Every 2 weeks they have been going on these missions and will continue at least through December. The next one's sold out, so you have to wait till mid-June. It will take 4 days of your life. You will be jet-lagged more than the time that you spent in Israel. But you will thank yourself. You will thank every Israeli that you meet. And what I saw and witnessed, and I could not believe, is they will thank you. For when you do, you will be part of transforming that land into Artzot HaChayim, the land of the living, the land of Israel. Am Yisrael Chai. Shabbat Shalom.